Welcome to Yin and Young. The following is a story taken from Chapter 3. I have called it Big Fish and Small in New Shanghai. I hope you enjoy it. A young child's sense of time is different from an adult's. Yesterday was years ago, and today is infinite. Each morning there is a sense of possibility reminiscent of fairy tales. Yinlin walked out into the day greeting her surroundings. A white butterfly wafted about, up and over, drooping down, then twirly about with another butterfly. The paved surface of the living area around the house looked cleanly swept in the morning sun. Neighbors came and went, while a few sat outside with their tea or rice bowls. Yinlin absorbed the world in the grand inquisitive silence that surrounds a child, and the world welcomed her. Even the sour smells had a sense of familiarity and warmth, and dust from a stone felt friendly. Life invited inspection and curiosity. Yinlin frequently enjoyed the pleasures of her solitude, wandering about the area, or finding a corner where she could eat a snack and read. However, there would be no time for reading today. Today, Yinlin would learn more about the larger world. Yinlin and her mother were going to the city. "Come, come," her mother said. Juyu grabbed her daughter's hand and they both waved goodbye to Nai and headed down the road. A bus took them into the city where the streets turned quickly from soft dirt into asphalt. And while the road widened, it also got more crowded with ox carts and pull carts, loaded down with vegetables, brooms, or other simple household services. Cyclists filled the streets, and the occasional truck or car weaved through the crowd. Traffic was not as we know it today, with lanes and rights of way. It was more like fish in a river. Small fish made their way for big ones. Strong and fast whipped around the slow and weak. From time to time the bus stopped and took on more people, getting so crowded that Yinlin was glad to have a seat next to the window. Her mother put Yinlin on her lap as she slid over to allow an elderly person the spot where she had been sitting. Outside the window, Yinlin observed a man sitting with a large pile of long green beans in front of him on a cart. All around him people lined up as someone down the way was cooking something and steam was rising into the air. Next to him, 3 ladies sat behind a wagon that had 3 baskets of taro root piled high. One of them grabbed a root and rubbed some dirt off just as the bus pulled away. Gradually, the roadside sellers gave way to shops and storefronts. The time came to get off the bus, and after being deposited on the street, Yinlin was amazed. There were people everywhere, and they dressed differently. The standard blue and gray loose-fitting clothing that was still fairly common around Yinlin's home gave way to white-colored shirts for men and light blue or yellow blouses for women. Boys generally wore shorts. Girls wore dresses or skirts. The clothes got brighter and more colorful on those who were younger. Some people moved with purpose, while others lingered. A group of men and a young boy crouched down on the sidewalk, sharing some broken pieces of watermelon between them. As Yinlin and her mother passed the side streets, they saw many others, sitting in chairs or on stools, smoking, visiting, or just sitting and watching others. The buildings up and down the streets had large windows displaying the wonders that until now Yinlin had not seen. Some windows displayed electric fans. Some showed refrigeration boxes, and others had television sets. A large sign in strange script hung from outside one of the buildings, and in huge Roman letters spelled the word Seiko, downward in the vertical manner of Chinese writing. Along the side of one wall, Yinlin saw a large color poster, not of Chairman Mao, but the face of a Chinese woman with short hair and rosy cheeks, smiling beside 3 colored packets of soap bars. High up above another building was an image with 3 faces. The face on the left looked normal. In the middle was a very white face, and on the right a very brown face, and beside the faces was a table tennis bat and ball. Yinlin stopped in front of one of the storefront windows and pulled on her mother's hand. "What's that?" Yinlin asked. "That's a television," her mother replied. Yinlin paused to look. She didn't know that such items cost half a year of the average worker's salary. The televisions were like boxes with windows on them, and in the windows you could see moving images, usually a person talking, but sometimes there were images of people riding bicycles or farming. Some images were black and white, while others were color. One of the screens flashed an image of a smiling woman who looked different than any that Yinlin had ever seen. Her hair was a golden color, and her eyes looked strange. She was talking and smiling while holding a bottle of dark liquid next to her cheek, and her bright red lips kept moving, talking about some soundless thing. Her head and body swayed from side to side in an unusual way. It wasn't normal for Yinlin to see an adult move her body in natural flowing motions. Normally an adult would be more polite and cautious in her movement. The strangeness of this scene fascinated and captured Yinlin. She stared. Juyu too seemed curious but didn't want her curiosity to be noticed. She looked around the oblivious crowd and pulled on Yinlin's hand. "Come." Yinlin resisted by letting her hand slip out of her mother's as she stood watching the television sets. "Come," her mother repeated, reaching out and grabbing Yinlin, forcing her feet to rapidly catch up with her body. They walked several blocks, Yinlin's mother searching carefully up and down each street until she saw what she was looking for on the opposite side. They waited until a space opened, then dodged and weaved through the various small carts and bicycles to the other side. They arrived at a store. The store did not have a window front, it simply had a sign above the door that said, "Sweaters." Its only entrance was very crowded with people pushing to get in, as well as squeezing themselves out. Yinlin's mother jostled her way into the line, pulling Yinlin along with her. Juyu had often spoken about how much she wanted a wool sweater, and she had heard from somewhere that such sweaters were being sold in the city. Obviously, many other people had heard similarly, and were now seeking the object of their desires. As Juyu pressed her way into the store, they eventually came to a glass counter which displayed 3 different sweaters. Behind the glass counter were several clerks. It must have been difficult for them if each day was like today, noisy and with no sense of order. There was no number to pick, no line, just pushing and crowding for attention. Each person acted urgently, as if they might be overlooked, and quickly shouted to the next available clerk what style and size of sweater they wanted. Yinlin felt she couldn't breathe. "I want that one," Juyu shouted. But the clerk she was speaking to had turned to look elsewhere at just that moment and attended to someone else. A pallid-looking male clerk with a slightly oversized white shirt appeared out of the din. He looked at her and said briskly, "What do you want?" Yinlin's mother pointed down into the glass display, half shouting, "This one here! I want this one!" "You want that one there, that one?" He adjusted his accent to hers, repeating her request in a mocking tone. She nodded, and he disappeared to return moments later, tossing the sweater to her. It was folded in a bundle and tied with string. There in front of her, on the display glass counter, was the wool sweater that Juyu had dreamt of for so long. It was a yellow-green color and had a thick blue bar that went around the chest area. Below that was a thinner bar, also blue, and then below that again a much thinner blue stripe. Juyu so admired this sweater. The cost for it was 14.99 yuan, almost the salary of a worker at the time, which was 18 yuan per month. Juyu spotted a knitted floral bundle that could be purchased as an accessory for another 3.49 yuan. "Give me that also." The man grabbed it, and also tossed it onto the counter. Juyu placed her money down. He looked at her and in the same mocking accent asked, "You get how much back?" "You calculated." Juyu, who was an accountant, almost without hesitation said, "The total is 18.48, and you need to give me 1.52, she replied. The man stared for a moment, then bent down to pull an abacus from a drawer. He dropped it on the counter and began slipping and sliding the black buttons up and down, then back again, pausing a few times until he came to the result. He looked up at Juyu, nodded his head slightly, then glancing at Yinlin, he took the money off the counter. Yinlin realized that while he needed an abacus to calculate the total, her mother did not. The man disappeared again, then returned. He reached out, and in a more polite manner he said, "Your change," and turned to address the next customer. Yinlin and her mother pushed their way back through the line crowding the entrance and burst out onto the street. Juyu had a cloth bag which she brought for this purpose, and placed the sweater and accessory inside. "What's that thing?" Yinlin asked. Juyu grabbed the accessory and held it for Yinlin to see. "It goes with your hair, you see?" Juyu made a motion to show where the accessory might be placed. Looking obviously delighted, Juyu took Yinlin back across the street to a restaurant they had passed. There was a long line of people, but the line moved quickly, and Juyu bought 6 pan-fried pork buns which were placed in a paper wrap. Then, walking back to the place where the bus was to pick them up, they stopped to get a national popsicle for both Yinlin and her mother. Juyu sat on a concrete block near the spot where the bus would arrive, while Yinlin walked along the wall and sucked the sweet-tasting popsicle. Juyu asked Yinlin if the popsicle tasted good, and Yinlin nodded her head vigorously, while noisily sucking on the melting ice. Her mother bit the popsicle down, chewing and crunching it quickly, but Yinlin sucked slowly, enjoying every taste. "This is your city, Yinlin," she said. "All this belongs to you. Our family is Shanghainese, and one day when you grow up, you will know these streets very well."